What is Native spirituality? How is it different from Western spirituality and religion? What can we learn from our Native brothers and sisters in this area? Tonight, two Native women from Hazelton, BC, share with us their stories and insights of their spirituality, taped at the Museum of Anthropology on The Pressure Point.
Good evening. Welcome to Pressure Point. I'm Alvin Dixon, and with me is Marie Wilson and Vi Smith, who are from the Hazelton area and have worked in some research for the Gitxsan-Wet'suwet'en Tribal Council. Could you tell us, Marie, who the Gitxsan-Wet'suwet'en are and where Hazelton is?
Hazelton is on the Skeena River, between Smithers and Terrace. The Gitxsan and Wet'suwet'en people live in the Skeena Valley. The Gitxsan people live in the Skeena Valley. The Wet'suwet'en people live in the Bulkley Valley.
Yes. We want to talk this evening about spirituality. Maybe you could give us the Gitxsan definition of spirituality.
Perhaps before I do that, Alvin, we should establish what spirituality is. Spirituality is that inherent power that makes us do the things we do. It is our intelligence, our mind. It is not religion, as most people seem to think. It is that intangible power that motivates us, be it in the wrong direction or in the right direction, and that the choice is always ours. Now, the Gitxsan spirituality is different from the Western conception of spirituality in that we believe that all life forms are equal, that all life forms are interdependent. One form cannot survive without the other, that there has to be respect and honor between the human species and the animal species, the plant species. The Gitxsan people believe that in order to live in this world, that we have to live in harmony with our partners in creation, the animals, the trees, the waters, the heavens. And they base that on, they did that by establishing a belief that if they always did what was right and good, that our lives would be very full and that we would survive. That is basically what the Gitxsan philosophy is.
Marie, do you have anything to add to that concept of spirituality?
I think it's common to all people, all groups of people. They have at one point to have to make a choice of a fundamental truth by which they're going to live, and then to base their society on the patterned energy, use of their energy towards that goal. And that is what we had in Gitxsan.
Now, you mentioned patterning a society. Now, could you tell us how the Gitxsan used the spirituality to pattern their society?
I'll say a few words and then I'd ask Vi to take over from there.
Yes.
When we, I'll go back to the research for a moment, if you don't mind.
Yes.
When we did the research, we found that we couldn't discuss any facet of Gitsan life. And here we'll speak for Gitsan, because we are Gitsan. We have no right to speak for anyone else at the moment. That we couldn't touch any facet of their lives without pulling out a little of the philosophy or spirituality or fundamental truth, whichever you want to call it. We called it the ball of wax. There's no way you could pull out anything without pulling a little of that spirituality out with it, because it was the strength of everything that they did. And it was a reinforcement, and they reaffirmed and lifted it up all the time by their actions and thoughts to the spirituality which sparked this energy. And Vi can speak on that too, I think, because she understands it well.
Vi, could you elaborate on that then?
There's so much I'd like to say. I find it quite hard to know where to begin. The Gitxsan people were based everything on the way they felt about their position in this world. When we were doing the research, the people who taught us or tried to guide us said we had to have a model. So we searched for a model to base our research on, and they came up with a model, little boxes where we would put in the different things like economics and the different parts, aspects of a life. And they said, well, you start with the economics. You start with if you learn the economics of any culture, you will know the people. There were about 8 of us in the research group, and we weren't too comfortable with this concept that we had to start with the economics. And anyway, one of the questions we asked them was, after we have filled all these little boxes, what do we put in the, did they call it spirituality? Religion. They had religion. That was what they had. And one of the experts said, well, anything that is left over, you put it in the in the religion box. And well, we did not agree with this, because we did not know why at the time, but we felt that the spirituality should have been first and then the other. We could talk about the others afterwards.
Maybe before we get into the difference between Gitxsan spirituality and the Western form of religion or Christianity, we should maybe just wander over and move to another station in this great hall of Indian spirituality. Mm-hmm. We've talked a bit about spirituality already, and could you give us some idea of what separates your spirituality from the Western world's view of spirituality?
Yes.
Or religion?
Oh, sorry. Yes, we could, because in our research, it became very clear why there were differences between the two people. In the Gitxsan, they believed in the circle. Vi spoke about creation. They understood that everlasting, inclusive flow of all life. They understood the length of a lifespan. And they believed that all within that circle of creation were equal, all life forms. And so they must live in a relationship where they were acceptable to other life forms. In our Western society, in which we are now a part of that Western society in many ways, they think of creation as a triangle with man at the top, so that the word resources is not your partner in creation, but a product to be used for the satisfaction of men. And it's this vital difference that makes the relationship difficult to bring into line with Western society. The Gitsan version of creation, which is the everlasting circle of life and change, and this other, where we believe that man has dominion over the fowl of the air and the fish of the deep, and that he has the privilege or the right to use, abuse other resources on the planet Earth, and I use the word resources as an English term, in any way that will benefit mankind. And I think that is the basic difference between the two philosophies of life, or we call it the fundamental truth, that all life is equal and necessary and to be respected. To use or abuse one is to endanger all. That's Gitsan. And on the other hand, we have the triangle, where we don't seem to have a perception of a lifetime of 70 years. And we truly believe that man sits at the top of the triangle with the right to use resources to his betterment. And that is the basic difference. We come from opposite ends of the spectrum.
Now, there's obviously a philosophy behind that. How did that philosophy give strength to the Gitsan people?
It was a part of their everyday life. It wasn't just something they picked up on special days like we do today. It was every moment of their lives that they applied this besides realizing the importance that a person have dignity and respect for all other life forms, they realize that in order to live the kind of life that they, as a people, that they had to do the things that were right. And I think that's applying it in their everyday life was the important thing. Right from childhood we are taught that our identity is very important. It's still important today. No Gitsan is ever lost. We belong somewhere. In the Western society, we distinguish children if they are illegitimate. We don't do that in our culture. All children are equal, just like all the other life forms. And so there are no illegitimate children a long time ago in our culture. And I think the strength behind that is that all children have mothers, and that is why we favor the matrilineal system. Everybody has a mother, and you always know who your mother is. You may not always know who your father is, but you do know who your mother is. And therefore, that sense of identity, I think, was important to the people. I know it was certainly important in my life. I always knew who I was. I never had to go searching. I was taught that, and I think one of our problems today is that so many of our young modern Gitsans are not taught who they are. They've lost that, and therefore there's the possibility that too many of us are floundering around trying to fit into the Western society and still clinging to our Gitsan way of life.
There's obviously a philosophy behind the Gitsan spirituality. Could you explain how that philosophy gives strength to the Gitsan people?
There are many ways that strength goes on. It is done through their everyday life. Their spirituality is applied every day, not just on certain days. In my own life, during my childhood, my parents always made me aware of who I was, and I think that's a part of our spirituality, always knowing who we are, where we fit in this creation. Identity is very important in a person's life. I have always known who I am. My parents saw to that. I don't have to go searching to find myself. And I think that gave me strength. In spite of the mistakes that I may make, I always had this to guide me, that I always knew when to stop. And I think that's part of the spirituality that my parents passed on to me. There are many ways that it goes on today. The elders still share the legends that talk about the spirituality that we are talking about. Most of the legends deal with what happens, dire consequences when a person does not do things in the right way, and the good things that happen when he does things properly. And those legends are told over and over again. And that was how it survived over the years. We are an oral society, and if you read of the legends a long time ago and heard an elder tell it today, it would be almost word for word, that it doesn't change.
The question of creation, then, is there a legend or a story that is Gitxsan on creation?
You take that one.
Can't think of one at the moment that I could possibly tell in the limitations of this moment.
You used the word truth a lot in your discussion on spirituality. What is truth in Gitxsan?
I'll take that question. Truth is not a static thing. My truth is not your truth, and there are many reasons for that. The fact that you're male and I'm female puts a definition between us. Age difference puts a definition. So the truth is what you know. That is their definition of truth. Truth is what I know, because what I know is the only thing that I can swear to as truth. And they use this at all times for a very basic reason. Truth, you don't have to defend truth. If you vary from truth, if you tell a lie, you're constantly defending yourself. There's no reason to defend truth. So that truth was the basic ingredient of their philosophy.
Okay, well, let's move on to another station in this Hall of Truth. Marie, you started to tell us about the Circle of Reason. Could you go back to it and explain to us?
Yes. This was a model that Vi spoke about when she was speaking earlier. And we devised this model when we were teaching children in the school, in the high school. And we wanted something they could plug into so that what we were telling them would become a reality. And we could trace the reasons why people did things the way they did. And in this model, we started, as Vi has said, with spirituality, because we knew it existed and that it motivated the people. It was their fundamental truth that all life was equal and to be respected. And in order to keep this alive, they made certain rules, they programmed themselves, they patterned their energy in a manner that would keep this truth alive. And some of these principles or values were that they would take only what was required. They would show respect to all creative forces. These were the type of things that the principles that they devised. And because they practiced what they preached, essentially, their lives were patterned into a particular way. And it was out of this patterning of their belief that their social order grew, and that dealt with their tribal affiliation, with relationships to neighboring people, with their economics, with their politics, with everything. So their social order became patterned in a certain way. When any large group of people are assimilated into a group, they need some controlling influence to motivate them and to keep the dream alive. And so our very progressive and reasonable ancestors chose to do this by selecting extraordinary people to be their leaders, to be their healers, to be their craftspersons. These persons were selected at birth, and they were trained for the job. The Indian people the Gitsan people in particular, understood professionalism to its highest degree, partly because, as Vi said, it was a matter of survival, that these people should surely know everything that could save and enhance the quality of life. And so they chose these people and trained them, and they considered the training an investment in their future. Now, once they had chosen these people, they automatically, they had authority. And as I say, this was where the chiefs were selected, and Vi described the qualities that were necessary for this leadership. And authority automatically assumes, but before that I must mention that the type of power that they gave to these people was not power in the English sense of the word. It was inner power. It was self-control. The hardest form of control, the most sophisticated form of control. Why else did we not have jails, policemen, courts, lawyers? We were required to use an inner control to discipline ourselves. And these people who held the authority automatically assumed power. And again, I must tell you that the word power is the only English word we could find to define this situation. But it too was a different kind of power. It was an inner power. This inner power came, we were talking about the name, being eternal, about the name that the chief assumed gave him the responsibility to care for that territory, which was equal to the life of the people. The land and the people depended upon each other. And so this power came when he put on the robes, the wonderful robes of power that you see in the museum today. These robes of power and the headpiece which defined him as being an unusual person or an unusual woman, because it could be man or woman, there was total equality in that respect. These robes of power also brought this particular form of power. And when I talked to my husband about it and he tried to explain what the words meant, he explained to me that this power came with the blanket. It sat beside the man. It wasn't in a box, but it was there. And when he required this power, which was the essence of all the experience of all the people who had held that name before him, he could turn and reach into it and lift out what he needed and use it. But he did not wear it like a crown. He put it back when it was not required. It was a very particular kind of power. And this power that this person held, and that could be a chief or a healer or a person who was a psychic. There were many people who held power in the Gitsan society. That power had to be tempered by their responsibility, because Gitsan believed in equations. There was no such thing as take and take and take. The perfect balance always had to be maintained. And so that person had to temper this great authority and power that he or she held with this deep sense of responsibility. As Vi has explained, to always do what was right and good for the people. That was the criteria for his actions. And as Vi also said before, he could go and have counsel with his people. But in the end, he made the decision. It was a very lonely job. Now, where did these lonely people go when they required help or solace or more strength? They went directly back into the spirituality we talked about. And there they fed on it. And they found the power and the strength to do what they had to do. And the circle began again. Each thing enhanced the other. It was the fundamental truth that set the pattern. It was the pattern that defined the social order. The people who are the social order selected those and trained them and then stepped back and allowed them to operate. But they also placed on them this terrible burden of responsibility. To be selected as a Gitsan is to surrender your freedom. You are forever changed. And they always came back to feed on the spirituality. And that was the fundamental truth, that all life is equal, and that a person in authority must balance that authority by doing what was right and good for the people. And that is the circle of reason. It defines Gitsan belief and the manner in which they supported that belief. And we've used it often, and it's always been a very effective tool, especially when we're dealing with children. But we've used it many, many times. And all it does is reinforce as we speak. We can put our hand on a circle and say, this is why we're doing it. But always, always there's that connection to the spirituality.
I guess what I would like to say is that the strength that these people received from this, it gave them the strength to do the many things they had to do, and it all goes back to what we call respect today. They respected all life forms.
You mentioned training from the beginning and self-control. What happens when somebody didn't exercise self-control?
This would be you're speaking now of the cultural period of the ideal society?
Yes.
They had very effective ways of dealing with that. They did not kill people. They withdrew from them, and that was probably one of the most painful things for a person in the conditions of that time, was to be isolated from the group.
Thank you, Marie Wilson, Vi Smith, and thank you for watching Pressure Point. Good night.
Bye.